You walk through your front door. Maybe you kick your shoes off. Maybe you don't. Maybe you head straight to the kitchen, put your phone on the counter, touch the fridge, open a cabinet, and start your evening without thinking about any of it. It feels perfectly normal. That is exactly why it matters. Because in many Japanese homes, especially in homes run by women who think deeply about order, cleanliness, and daily rhythm, some of these tiny actions would stand out immediately. Not as shocking, not as dramatic, but quietly unsettling. The kind of thing that makes someone pause for half a second and think, wait, you do that here? And the strange part is this. These habits are not signs that someone is dirty. They are not proof that Western people do not care about hygiene. Most people never question them because they are woven into ordinary life. They happen fast. They happen automatically. You probably did this today. That is what makes them powerful. Real hygiene is often invisible. It is not the dramatic deep clean. It is not the expensive product under the sink. It is not the once-a-week panic cleaning before guests arrive. It is the small decision made at the exact moment when dirt, bacteria, moisture, or contamination first tries to enter your routine. And once you start seeing life that way, a lot of familiar habits begin to look different. Today, we are going to look at 7 everyday hygiene habits that often feel completely harmless in the West, but can seem careless, uncomfortable, or simply hard to understand from the perspective of many Japanese housewives. Some of these are backed by scientific studies. Some are cultural. Some sit right in the middle, where biology and social behavior quietly overlap. And one of the later habits changes the way most people think about hygiene altogether. Because the real difference here is not perfection. It is not obsession. It is not about trying to sterilize life. It is about noticing the tiny systems that shape a home. Once you notice them, it becomes hard to unsee them. And by the end of this video, there is a very good chance you will look at your own daily routine and think, wait, I do this too. Why Japanese housewives think differently. Before we get to the first habit, it helps to understand the mindset behind the reaction. In many Japanese homes, cleanliness is not treated as a rescue mission. It is treated as prevention. That sounds simple, but it changes everything. In a lot of Western households, cleaning begins after something becomes visibly dirty. Mud is on the floor. The sink smells strange. The counter feels sticky. The bathroom looks like it needs attention. Then cleaning starts. But in many Japanese homes, especially traditional ones, the ideal is to interrupt the problem before it spreads. Keep outdoor dirt near the entrance. Keep bathwater clean before anyone enters it. Keep shared spaces calm. Keep routines small enough that they can happen every day without drama. This is why cleanliness in Japan often feels less like an event and more like a rhythm. A clean home is not just about appearance. It is connected to peace of mind, to respect for other people, to reducing friction, to making the home feel emotionally light. And that may be the most important point. Japanese housewives are often admired not because they chase perfection, but because they build tiny systems that make cleanliness easier to maintain. They do not wait for chaos and then fight it. They quietly design against it. That is a very different way of thinking, and once you see that difference, these 7 habits start to make a lot more sense. Habit 1. Shoes indoors. There is something deeply ordinary in the West about walking into your own home with shoes still on. You step inside after work. Maybe your hands are full. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you tell yourself you will take them off in a second. So you walk to the kitchen, maybe the living room, maybe the bedroom. And to a lot of Western people, that barely registers as a hygiene issue at all. But to many Japanese housewives, this is not a small thing, because when they look at your shoes, they are not seeing shoes. They are seeing the last 12 places those soles have touched. Sidewalks, parking lots, gas stations, public restroom floors, train platforms, restaurant entrances, rainwater, oil residue, dust, old gum, everything dragged across a city and pressed flat against the bottom of your foot. Then that enters the home. Not the symbolic home. The real home. The place where people sit. Where socks touch the floor. Where children crawl. Where someone may fold laundry. Where someone may stretch, kneel, or place clean bedding. This is one reason the Japanese genkan matters so much. It creates a physical border between outside and inside, with a lower entry area where shoes come off before a person steps into the living space. In that system, removing shoes is not just etiquette. It is a built-in barrier against carrying the street into the home Japan experience. And science makes that instinct look even less symbolic than it seems. Research reviews have found that shoe soles can carry infectious microorganisms and transfer them to floor surfaces through walking. One review describes shoe soles as frequent vectors for contamination, and notes that this transfer can happen in both healthcare and non-healthcare settings, PMC. So when a Japanese housewife reacts badly to outdoor shoes indoors, she is not being fussy. She is noticing a broken boundary. The practical takeaway is simple. Choose one clear stopping point at the entrance. Make the outside stop there. And strangely, this is not the habit Japanese housewives worry about most. Habit 2. Flushing without closing the toilet lid. Let me ask you something. When you flush the toilet, what exactly do you think happens? Most people think the answer is obvious. Water goes down. Problem solved. Move on. But that mental picture is incomplete, because flushing is not only a downward event, it is also an upward one. A surprising amount of research has looked at what is sometimes called the toilet plume, tiny droplets and aerosols released during flushing. A major review of the literature concluded that contaminated toilets can produce both larger droplets and smaller airborne particles during a flush, and that these particles may help spread microorganisms, PMC. That does not mean every flush is a crisis. It does not mean people should become paranoid in their own bathroom, but it does mean the old habit of flushing with the lid open suddenly looks less innocent. In many Japanese homes, closing the lid feels like common sense. It is one of those quiet protective habits, low effort, low drama, potentially meaningful. And what makes this especially interesting is that closing the lid is not magic. The same review suggests it can reduce spread, but not fully eliminate it. In other words, this is not about becoming obsessive. It is about reducing what you can reduce, PMC. That mindset is very Japanese, not perfection. Reduction, not fear. A small layer of prevention. So the simple action here is easy. Close the lid before you flush. No speech. No ceremony. Just 1 extra second. And once you start seeing hygiene as control of invisible movement, habit 3 becomes even more revealing. Habit 3. Treating every bath like a quick shower. In much of the West, bathing is practical. You get in, you wash, you rinse, you get out. It is efficient. It is private. It is often rushed. For many adults, especially in busy countries, the shower has become a narrow tunnel between obligations. Morning starts there. Gym routines end there. It is less of a ritual and more of a reset button. But in Japan, bathing developed along a different emotional track. The ofuro is not just about getting clean. It is also about transition. In Japanese bathing culture, especially in traditional homes and bathhouses, the body is washed before entering the tub. The soaking water is meant to remain clean, because the purpose of the bath is not primarily scrubbing. It is soaking, warming, softening the body, and calming the mind, Japan Guide. That difference tells you something important. In many Western homes, the bath or shower is where cleaning happens. In the Japanese mindset, cleaning and soaking are often separated. First clean, then rest. That may sound minor, but it reflects a whole philosophy. The body is not rushed through hygiene. The home does not only remove dirt, it restores balance. That helps explain why a Japanese housewife may quietly dislike the Western habit of treating every bath as a fast mechanical rinse. Not because showers are bad, not because one system is morally superior, but because something valuable gets lost when bathing becomes only functional. The Japanese version carries another message. Hygiene affects mood. Warm water after proper washing slows the nervous system. It marks the end of the outside world. It helps the mind arrive home. That is why this habit is really about more than soap. It is about whether cleanliness is only a task or also a form of care. The practical takeaway here is not that you need to turn your bathroom into a hot spring. It is simpler than that. At least sometimes stop treating bathing like a race. Wash with intention. Let the body understand that the day is changing. Because habit 4 shows how even when people do try to wash properly, they often still rush the moment that matters most. Habit 4. Rinsing hands too quickly. Most people believe they wash their hands, and technically they do. Water runs. Soap appears. There is a little rubbing, then it is over almost before it began. It feels responsible. It feels like enough. But a fast rinse is one of those habits that creates the illusion of hygiene more than the result of it. According to the CDC, proper hand washing means scrubbing with soap for at least 20 seconds, not just wetting the hands and moving on. The guidance specifically emphasizes lathering the backs of the hands, between the fingers, and under the nails, CDC. That matters because the places people miss are usually the places doing the most touching. Fingertips, thumbs, between fingers, backs of hands, the parts that open doors, tap screens, hold railings, touch faces, handle money, pick up food. And this is where Japanese domestic culture becomes interesting again. In Japan, many children are taught hand washing as a repeated social habit, not a vague suggestion. Cleanliness training starts early and is linked to shared responsibility, routine, and not passing problems to other people. The broader cultural emphasis on maintaining clean surroundings from childhood helps make these habits feel normal rather than optional BBC travel. So when a Japanese housewife sees someone do the 3-second hand rinse, the reaction is not, "They are disgusting." It is more like, "They think they washed their hands, but they didn't really." That difference between feeling clean and being clean is huge. So here is the practical fix. Slow down just enough to finish the job. 20 seconds. Soap. Fingertips. Thumbs. Between fingers. Backs of hands. It is not a major life change, but it changes the quality of one of the most repeated actions in your day. And the next habit has almost nothing to do with bacteria at first glance, which makes it even more revealing. Habit 5. Blowing your nose around others. In most Western countries, blowing your nose into a tissue is seen as polite. You are taking care of it. You are not sniffing. You are not ignoring it. You are handling it. That is the logic. And from a Western point of view, that makes sense. But in Japan, the social meaning is different. There, blowing your nose loudly in public can be seen as disruptive, unhygienic, or uncomfortable for the people around you. Many people prefer to step away first, find a more private place, or wear a mask if they are unwell. In that context, the goal is not just personal relief. It is minimizing discomfort for the group gaijin pot. This is not really about whether one country understands mucus and another does not. It is about what good manners are supposed to protect. Western etiquette often prioritizes directness and individual management. Japanese etiquette often prioritizes harmony and shared spaces. So the same action can be interpreted through two different moral lenses. One says, "Good, you dealt with it." The other says, "Did you have to do that here?" That is why this habit fascinates people. It is not a cleanliness clash. It is a sensitivity clash. Japanese housewives often extend the idea of hygiene beyond surfaces and into atmosphere. What enters a shared room? What sound fills it? What visible signs of illness are pushed into public space? What subtle burden gets placed on other people? That way of thinking also helps explain the cultural comfort with masks. A mask is not always a sign of fear. Sometimes it is a sign of consideration. So the practical takeaway here is not that you should feel ashamed for blowing your nose. It is simply this. If possible, step away. Use a restroom. Use a private corner. Be aware of the space you are sharing. Because by the time we reach habit 6, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. A lot of what looks clean can actually spread more mess. Habit 6, washing raw chicken. This habit actually makes the kitchen less clean, and that is why it is so important. A lot of people still rinse raw chicken out of instinct. Maybe their parents did it. Maybe they think it removes slime. Maybe it just feels wrong to cook meat that has not been washed. The intention is understandable, but the science is blunt. The USDA says washing or rinsing raw poultry can increase the risk of illness because bacteria can spread around the kitchen through splashing. In one USDA-backed study, 60% of participants who washed raw poultry had bacteria in the sink afterward, and 26% transferred bacteria to salad lettuce USDA. Think about that for a second. You believe you are cleaning the chicken, but what you may actually be doing is launching contamination onto the sink, the faucet, the counter, nearby utensils, and any food waiting close by. This is a perfect example of invisible hygiene failure. It feels perfectly normal. That is exactly why it matters. And from the perspective of many Japanese kitchens, where space can be smaller and routines are often tighter, this kind of splash contamination feels especially senseless. The goal is usually to contain mess, not energize it. So what should happen instead? Do not wash the chicken. Cook it properly. Wash your hands after handling it. Clean and sanitize the surfaces it touched. That is the cleaner system, not because it feels cleaner in the moment, but because it reduces spread. And now we come to the final habit. The object that goes to bed with you, sits beside your food, touches public surfaces, travels into bathrooms, and then returns to your face. The object most people clean less often than a kitchen handle. Your phone. Habit 7, your phone touches everything. This may be the most modern hygiene habit of all, because older generations did not carry one object through every zone of life the way we do now. Your phone is in your hand while you commute, on a table during lunch, in your palm in the supermarket, on your bed at night, beside your pillow, near your face, sometimes in the bathroom, sometimes on the kitchen counter, sometimes in the same hand you use to prepare food. and almost nobody treats it like a contaminated object. That is what makes it so interesting. We disinfect countertops. We wipe sinks. We notice dirty floors, but the one item that follows us everywhere often escapes the category of needs cleaning. Research reviews have described mobile phones as significant microbial reservoirs and even potential Trojan horses for transmission. One scoping review of 56 studies found an average contamination rate of 68% and emphasized that phones frequently move between hands, faces, and multiple surfaces throughout the day, NCBI PMC. In other words, the phone is not just dirty in one place. It is mobile dirt, portable contact, a bridge, and that is where the Japanese housewife mindset becomes so sharp. Because this is not about whether your phone looks clean. It is about where it has been allowed to travel without boundaries. The bathroom, the dinner table, the pillow, the makeup area, the kitchen, the child's hands, your own face. So let me ask the uncomfortable question. How often do you actually disinfect your phone? Not think about it, not mean to, actually do it. Even health guidance on cleaning frequently touched surfaces and electronics emphasizes following manufacturer instructions, and manufacturers like Apple explicitly say exterior surfaces can be wiped gently with appropriate alcohol-based disinfecting wipes. CDC Apple support. So the action here is simple. Clean the phone regularly and stop placing it on food prep surfaces and bedding without thinking. Because this may be the smallest object in your home, but it quietly follows you everywhere. Final section. 7 decisions you can make tonight. If there is one thing Japanese housewives understand well, it is this. A clean home is usually not created by heroic effort. It is created by systems so small they almost disappear. That is why these 7 habits matter. Not because each one is catastrophic. Not because every mistake will make you sick. Not because life should become tense and over-controlled. But because tiny routines shape the emotional climate of a home. So tonight, instead of trying to become a different person, make 7 smaller decisions. Decide that the outside world stops at the entrance. Decide that when the toilet flushes, the lid closes first. Decide that bathing does not always have to be rushed like a pit stop between obligations. Decide that hand washing lasts long enough to count. Decide that bodily habits in shared spaces deserve a little more awareness. Decide that clean food is made safer by heat and handling, not by splashing raw meat around the sink. And decide that your phone is not separate from your hygiene routine just because it is personal. These are not big performances. They are little barriers, little forms of respect, little corrections that keep mess from spreading. That is the deeper lesson here. Japanese housewives do not rely on motivation every day. They rely on structure. They do not wake up inspired to fight dirt with passion. They build homes where the clean choice is simply easier to repeat. And maybe that is why their version of cleanliness feels so calm. It is not frantic. It is not loud. It is not about chasing spotless perfection. It is about reducing friction. Reducing transfer. Reducing the amount of outside chaos that reaches the inside of life. A clean home does not begin with cleaning. It begins with the small decisions you repeat every day. So now I want to ask you, which habit surprised you the most? And which one made you stop and think, wait, I do that too? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy videos exploring Japanese home wisdom, daily routines, and cultural habits that quietly change the way we live, subscribe and stay with us for the next one. Because sometimes the most powerful changes are the ones hidden inside the things that feel normal.